November descended upon our city like a thick fog, destroying the streets and darkening the sky. The days were short, the night seemed to last forever, and long shadows danced across the landscape. On that dark November night, isolated from our community, my friends and I decided to escape the stifling atmosphere of our city and head for the forest. I named him Blackwood. That's what I called him before I was held in his fearful arms. The trees were tall and bare, their branches stretched out like bony fingers, and the ground was covered in thick leaves that rustled under my shoes. It was our secret sanctuary, a place where we could be ourselves without the judgmental eyes of the city. On that November day, the sky was clear and the sunset was coloured orange and red. The five of us, Jake, Lily, Mark and Emily, entered Blackwood with a sense of adventure, not knowing what terrible changes our time would bring. As we went deeper into the forest, the sunlight decreased and the atmosphere changed. The once playful caress gave way to an unspoken tension that hung thick in the air, as if the wind whispered through the bare branches, like the whisper of an unseen soul. Ignoring the growing discomfort, Emily suggested a game of hide and seek, thinking it would be an easy way to pass the time. The first round was uneventful. Laughter echoed through the trees as we ducked behind twisted trunks and fallen branches, the joy of play momentarily easing the tension in the building. However, when the second round started, the cold wind blowing through the forest sent shivers down my spine. The atmosphere of the game was as dark and menacing as the November sky. I closed my eyes to the rough bark of a large oak tree and counted out loud to give my friends time to find a place to hide. "Ready or not, I'm coming," I screamed when I heard the usual rustling and laughing as they ran for cover, but silence answered me. The deeper I got into Blackwood, the more worried I became. The fading light awakened my senses and every rustle of leaves startled me. A distant scream broke the eerie silence and horror filled my heart. It was Emily. As I made my way through the low trees, I was pushed forward by the fear of the forest around me. I ran to the small hole and saw Emily there holding a dark figure. As I ran towards them, the stranger's face was covered in darkness, and fear rose in my throat. I fought off my attacker, and my friends came out of the shadows to help. In the dim light, the faces of the strangers were still mysterious, but their desperation was clearly visible. We worked together to get them out, and Emily managed to get up. "Run, Emily. Go away," I screamed. My voice echoed through the clearing. We didn't expect to meet strangers or understand their motivations. As we passed through Blackwood, fear quickened our flight. The branches scratched our faces and the thorns tore our clothes. We ran out of breath in the forest and didn't stop until we were back in the safety of the city. The November night was dark and the stars twinkled as we witnessed the horror we had just escaped. We were both panting and confused. Blackwood, once our sanctuary, now felt like a wasteland full of secrets. As we walked back into town, the streetlights came on one after the other, and we swore we would never speak of that night again. The scars of the black tree lingering our memories, reminding us that even in our remote oases, darkness creeps in, casting a shadow over our carefree adventures. Months passed and Blackwood couldn't find us. Once upon a time, the enchanted forest became a forbidden area that no one could enter without fear. Although the November air was cold, there remained a warmth and a shared experience between us. This event created a relationship between us that went beyond mere teenage friendship. Blackwood has become a cautionary tale in our group, a whispered warning to those who dare to venture where we once fearlessly played. November revealed a side of city we never knew existed in the dark and gloom. The once protected forest now witnessed the night our carefree adventure took a terrifying turn. As I grew older, my memories of that November day faded, but the black tree remained, its mystery hidden beneath the fallen leaves. The forest has its place in our collective history, a dark chapter in the history of adolescence. The wound must have healed, but the November air forever carried the echo of the scream that echoed through the silent forest. a reminder that even in the safety of our small town, shadows can lurk where we least expect them. The November cold was like a ghostly veil when Sarah and I decided to escape the monotony of small town life and enjoy a quiet picnic by the river. Our village, coloured in the orange colours of autumn, looked very peaceful. Little did I know that the silence was just a surface of fear waiting to be unleashed. We packed a simple picnic basket and headed for a creek hidden under the bony branches of the trees. The leaves rustled in the wind as we walked hand in hand. The world was quiet, but not the peaceful quiet I had hoped for. It was the strange calm before the storm. We found the perfect spot on the river that looked like a postcard. The water flowed lazily and reflected the grey clouds above us. We spread our blankets, and for a moment everything felt calm. Our laughter mixed with the distant croaks of crows created a symphony of village happiness. But by the time we got our sandwiches out, the weather had changed. He was tormented by an inexplicable tension. I couldn't escape the feeling that some invisible eyes were watching us. Sarah, ever the optimist, dismissed my anxiety as mere paranoia. A sudden gust of wind extinguished the flickering flame of our candle. The surrounding forest felt suffocating. Then I heard her. It was a distant, plaintive voice that sent shivers down my spine. It was a sound foreign to man, a scream that reached the limits of our consciousness. Sarah's eyes widened in fear, and she took my hand. "Did you hear that?" My throat was dry and I nodded. "We have to leave." We hastily packed our bags and left the picturesque scene, which had been turned into a miserable place. As we retraced our steps through the deserted forest, the wind whispered ominous warnings. Shadows danced at the edges of our vision, and the once familiar trees now seemed like silent sentinels hiding terrible secrets. As we approached the village, the sky opened, but the echo of that pitiful cry remained in our hearts. We tried to rationalize whether it was the wind or the animals in the distance, but the discomfort clung to us like a second skin. As the days passed, we became more and more convinced that it was just a coincidence, a trick of the November wind. We decided to go back to everyday life and think of that memory as a quiet moment in our lives. But fate had other plans. One chilly afternoon, Sarah and I were taking our routine walk along the river when we came across a strange sight. A lifeless body lay like a discarded doll by the water's edge. The usual November sky is constantly raining, as if in mourning for the tragic events that lie ahead. I felt a lump in my throat, and the metallic taste of fear lingered on my tongue. Sarah gasped and covered her mouth with a shaking hand. The victim, a young woman, crouched with lifeless eyes, staring into the grey abyss above. The world around us shrank, the thick air filled with indescribable horror. Time stretches and warps, and it's as if we've entered a terrifying world where the laws of reality no longer apply. The once famous river was now tinged with filth and whispering untold stories. "I have to call the police," Sarah said in a barely audible voice. I reached for the phone, hands shaking as I dialed 911. The voice on the other end of the phone was a distant echo, my words slurred as I tried to deliver the terrible news. Help was on the way, but it seemed to take forever as the spectre of death haunted us. When the police arrived, we had a look of horror on our faces. When the investigation began, a shadow fell over our once peaceful city. The danger spread like wildfire, and the tragic event turned into a shocking event that permeated every corner of our society. Days turned into weeks, and the mystery deepened. The victim remained a ghost with no name and no past. The river, once a source of comfort, has become a reminder of unresolved nightmares. The peace we once took for granted has been shattered, leaving only a patchwork of broken fears and doubts. Sarah and I were unwilling witnesses, our lives intertwined with a tragedy we could not ignore. The police investigated us relentlessly, looking for clues that might unravel the mystery. We were delighted to learn that we were forever bound by the river's dark secret cooperation. Once a month in November, Constant meditation becomes a haunting melody that plays in the background of our lives. The city, once a friendly oasis, has become the scene of a terrible spectacle from which we cannot escape. The river whispered its secrets as it passed, carrying the weight of unspoken truths in the November winds. In the end, the answer eluded us. The river had a secret and the village had an incurable wound. Sarah and I stuck together, and our bond lasted through tragedy. The wind brought mysterious whispers, and November was an indelible chapter in our lives, a reminder that even the quietest landscape can hide the darkest secrets. November nights in our town were colder than a witch's teat. The wind rattled the windows and came through the cracks in the cold walls, shivering like restless ghosts. But because I'm a stubborn idiot, I decided to paint the house. I thought a new coat would be damn good for another winter. Little did I know that this choice would plunge me into a story darker than the ink-composed pen. So I was frozen walking around the warehouse looking for paint. Dust hung in the air as a reminder of the good old days. Spiders bigger than my grandmother hung in forgotten corners. The only company I had was the creaking stairs under my boots. I found an old, tattered bag tucked behind a paint can. When I removed it, the dust flew up and the bag was revealed to be an ancient leather relic. It smells like a secret I don't want to know. They gnaw at me with curious eyes, like rats in a forgotten cellar. The bag was heavier than my conscience, and my hand shook as I undid the rusty clasp. The first thing I saw was a pile of money. It glowed green, mocking the corruption around him. My eyes widened like a child discovering a treasure chest. But my gaze met something frightening. It was a cold, unmoving gun nestled among the bills. My heart beats like a drum in a death march. I wasn't looking for trouble. I was just trying to beautify my house. I was holding my bag like a bomb ready to explode, my thoughts racing faster than a prisoner on the run from the law. What confusion am I in? I called the police, going over the details like a kid trying to explain why their neighbor broke their window. He promised to send someone over, and in the meantime I sat with the mysterious bag in my arms and thought about the mess that had befallen me. Time passed like a shadow under the moonlight, and finally the sound of a siren pierced the silence. 2 policemen with faces as solemn as a judge entered my humble home. I pored over every detail I could muster: the story, the bag, the money, the gun, and hoped they would understand the confusion. The hawks narrowed their eyes and examined the bag as if they had found their prey. One of them, a mustachioed veteran who looked like he'd seen too much, whistled softly. "Son, you've hit a rat hole here. This is no ordinary paint job." They confiscated my bag and left me in the air, feeling uncomfortable. The cold wind outside seemed to be whispering a terrible secret, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I had opened a Pandora's box that I shouldn't touch. More painful days have passed than the past. The city was full of rumors like bees gathering around a hive. I was a local celebrity who discovered more than just paint cans in an old warehouse. Wherever I went, there were whispers denouncing the villagers' view of me as a harbinger of destruction. Finally, a week later, the police completely cracked the case. The money in the bag turned out to be part of the loot from a bank robbery that rocked the city a month ago. The man who committed the robbery was no ordinary gangster. It was a shadow that slipped through the fingers of the law like smoke. A grey policeman with a moustache came to see me. He looked like a man with so much to say, and his eyes held the weight of the world. "Good job, man. This bag was the key I needed to catch this slippery devil. I've been following him all week." The details unfolded like a detective novel. The robber hid his loot in the warehouse, thinking it would be the perfect hiding place. Maybe he was laughing because he thought he beat all the police. He didn't know I was coming and was an ignorant troublemaker. The villagers were as happy as if they had won the lottery. News of my arrest spread like wildfire, and I suddenly went from pariah to hero. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was just a pawn in a much bigger game than myself. A robber with a face as forgotten as yesterday's news was found on the street and handcuffed. The villagers were outraged by his courage and laughed and spat at him. The policeman sternly slapped me on the back. It was more of a burden than a celebration. As the robber disappeared behind the cold steel door of the police car, he looked at me. It was not an expression of gratitude or defeat. It was an expression full of anger and resentment. Goosebumps went up my spine, and I felt like I had encountered something bad. It's like I've been dreaming all night. As November wore on, the sun darkened. The village went back to its old routine, and this time I tried to carefully draw the house. Once a relic of a forgotten past, the warehouses now carry echoes of the crimes that stain the city's history. The wind still beat against the windows, but now it whispered the story of a man who believed he could defeat fate. I couldn't shake the feeling that every shadow held a secret darker than the night itself. Dipping my brush into a bucket of paint, I tried not to look over my shoulder, waiting for the ghost of a robber, still following shadows and escaping the inevitable. So I painted the house. It was every shot I remembered when, in the cold, merciless shadows of November, I faced the same bags of money and guns and went on a cat and mouse chase. Our sitter by the sea. Autumn leaves crunched under our boots as my friends Jake, Sarah, Mike and I walked along an old mountain trail. The sky is clear and the trees paint the landscape in orange and red. We went on an adventurous mission to enjoy the last bit of warmth before winter sets in. Little did we know that the mountain had other plans for us. The road was winding and the sun streamed through the tree branches above our heads. Laughter echoed throughout the forest as they shared stories and jokes, completely oblivious to the eerie atmosphere slowly seeping in. Our excitement masked a subtle discomfort lurking in the shadows. As we climbed higher, the wind whispered through the skeletal branches, creating an eerie symphony. The once bright fall colours now felt like a shadow of ominous foreboding, but I couldn't pay much attention to it. Eventually we came across a narrow road off the main road. Curiosity got the better of us, and with a common vision we decided to hit the road. As we ventured deeper into the unknown, the forest seemed to swallow us whole, and the rustling of the leaves beneath us grew louder in the silence. The road led us to a clearing, then we saw her. A pale, lifeless hand stuck out from the wet ground. A collective sigh escaped our lips, and our laughter turned into painful silence. The forest held its breath as if waiting for our reaction. Is it a human hand? Jake shivered and his eyes widened. Sarah stepped forward cautiously, her voice shaking. We have to contact the authorities. That's not fair, folks. Mike, ever the skeptic, quipped, maybe it's a Halloween prank. You know people these days, he said. But the anxiety remained, and the air seemed filled with invisible tension. Against our better judgment, like butterflies drawn to a restless flame, we decided to investigate further. I carefully excavated the hand and found it to be a decomposed hand in tattered clothes. Panic flashed across our faces as realization hit us. It's not a joke. It was the final resting place of someone disturbed by our morbid curiosity. Sarah, what if it's related to missing persons cases? The atmosphere changed and the forest closed in around us. The autumn breeze that I had welcomed with open arms now felt like a cold breath on the back of my neck. Embarrassed, we agreed to report the incident to the authorities, and our smiles turned to whispers and furtive glances. The descent felt longer than the ascent. Shadows danced in the fading light, and every rustle in the bushes sent shivers down our spines. The forest, once a colourful playground, now seemed like a scary maze hiding secrets we couldn't reveal. We arrived at the base and quickly informed the local sheriff that we were open. As we restored power to the clearing, we realised the gravity of the situation. Our initial excitement turned to sadness. We are facing a tragedy that has been hidden for many years. A few days passed and the news spread like wildfire through the small mountain village. Missing persons cases have entered our lives and become a terrible event that cannot be ignored. Once integrated communities are now surrounded by suspicion and fear. As the investigation continues, we learn the terrifying truth that the hand belongs to Emily Turner, a woman who disappeared 13 years ago. The circumstances surrounding her disappearance were as mysterious as the mountain itself, and her fate remains a mystery that still haunts the town. The discovery of Emily's remains shocked the community. Whispers of curses and ancient legends hung in the air, as if the mountain itself had given up its dark secrets. The once beloved autumn now bore the weight of its sad history, and its once vibrant leaves seemed stained with echoes of Emily's untold story. In the confusion, guilt gnawed at us. Our innocent actions revealed a story of loss and hopelessness, unable to shake the fact that we had violated something good that had been left untouched. The mountain, once a symbol of beauty, today rises above the city as a silent witness of forgotten suffering. As autumn turned to winter, the mountains stood like silent sentinels guarding the secrets of the past. The woods that were once a laughingstock now echo with the haunting whispers of stories that refused to bury themselves. Our once carefree friendship now bears the scars of shared trauma, recalling the day we met the hand that unraveled the mystery of Emily Turner's disappearance.
The crisp autumn air tickles my nose as I drive down the winding road to my family's deserted mountain home. It was a tradition, almost a ritual, held every fall. 2 days of isolation, leaves rustling against us, towering trees casting long shadows on the rocky ground. But this year, the situation has worsened, with events calling into question the significance of the annual Hajj. The first day was like any other day. We unpacked, lit the fireplace, and felt the warmth of familiarity. Over the years, the old cabin has become a second home, a refuge from the hustle and bustle of everyday life. The children's laughter echoed off the wooden walls as my wife prepared the feast in the kitchen. As night fell, we gathered round the flickering fire and talked of our past adventures in these mountains. The wind blew outside, adding an eerie soundtrack to our conversation. Still, we felt safe. The only creatures that lurk in the shadows are the nocturnal creatures that have become as much a part of this earth as the stones beneath our feet. But on the second day, there was a surprising change in mood. The wind whispered something unintelligible, and the hair on the back of my neck stood up. I tried to dismiss it as a figment of my overactive imagination, but the discomfort remained. The children, undeterred by the increasing stress, asked to go out for a walk again. We set off reluctantly, the towering mountains towering over us like silent sentinels. Rusty leaves crunched under our boots, a stark contrast to the deafening silence that surrounded us. The mountain itself seemed to be waiting for something. As we approached the clearing, a heartbreaking scream broke the silence. Our hearts were pounding, and we looked at each other in shock. I ran in the direction of the sound and passed through rocks and tree roots. Fear clawed at my chest as the screams grew louder, echoing through the trees like a haunting melody. At the edge of the field, I found something. A lifeless deer lay on the ground, its once crimson fur shining. But it was the stab in the side, the cruel and purposeful punctuation of his death that sent shivers down our spines. The children gasped in fear, and their innocent eyes widened. My wife held my hand, and her fingers dug into my skin. I searched the area for any signs of the culprit. The forest seemed to possess us. The trees seemed to whisper evil secrets. While I was in shock, the forest revealed its secret. Another scream, this time from further away, echoed through the trees. It was an unfamiliar sound, whether it was a human cry, a cry for help, or a warning. Fear gripped us, and we decided to go together to a mountain refuge. As we retraced our steps, the forest seemed to taunt us. The once familiar paths now full of unseen dangers. Every time a leaf rustled or a willow snapped, a shiver ran down my spine. The mountain that was once a refuge now felt like a maze of nightmares. We quickly packed our bags and returned home, leaving behind the warmth and safety we had known for years. The air inside was filled with foreboding, as if the walls themselves knew the secrets of the mountain. The screams continued as we descended, a strange serenade following us like an ominous shadow. The once comforting sounds of rustling leaves and snapping branches have now become a cacophony of fear. Our steps quickened, each of us trying to escape the nightmare that surrounded us. Several years have passed since that tumultuous autumn day, but it still lingers in his memory like a ghost. We did not return to the mountains, the scars of experience absorbed into our souls. The mystery of the screams and the terrifying sighting of the knife-wielding deer remain a dark chapter in our family's history. We never talked about it again, as if to say it would awaken a burning fear hidden deep within us. The mountains, once a place of solace, have become a forbidden territory. It's a reminder that some mysteries are better left unsolved. To this day, the identity of the person behind these screams and horrors remains a mystery. Perhaps the mountain jealously guarded its secrets with old trees and quiet whispers, and the unsettling reality of that autumn day lay hidden deep within, recalling the memories of those who braved its winding path.